Alright, The Black Phone. Tonight I'm going to talk about The Black Phone, and I've seen this movie twice as of recording it, and while I want to say that I do feel like the trailers of this movie have shown too much of it, at least for me, they didn't really spoil any of the scares for me, and I still thoroughly enjoyed this movie while seeing a couple of the trailers of this movie. So if you feel like the same way that I do, and that the trailers have shown too much of this movie, I still would recommend going to see it, because I do not think it would impact your experience that much. I want to keep this review brief, because I do not want to drag on for 15 minutes about a movie that I could talk about in 5. That's a problem that I have about some topics that I can get passionate about, and I will just drag on and on and on about them when I could just give you a movie review that's 5 to 10 minutes long. Even that. So, without further ado, let's get into The Black Phone. I think this movie had a fantastic style to it. It really kept the 70s aesthetic going the entire time. A majority of the movie was filmed with this filter that made it look grainy and a little dirty, as if it was filmed in the 70s, and there's even a few sequences in the movie that are filmed to look like they are on VHS tapes, and it really just helps the entire movie's tone, and it even makes it feel creepy. It just makes you feel slightly more uneasy. And a few of these scenes could easily pass as being filmed during that time period. So I really, really did like that. And on top of that, the score for this movie was great. At least during most parts of the movie, it was primarily a synth score, and it really helped either creep you out during some scenes or get you pumped up during certain action sequences or when something was about to happen. I really think that the music and the style of this movie went together to make a perfect tone. For the most part, the acting was pretty great, and I do want to shine a spotlight on Ethan Hawke, who played the grabber in this movie, the antagonist who kidnaps all of these children and kills them in horrible ways. I think Ethan Hawke was terrifying in this movie, and he had such a presence that when he wasn't even on screen, you still felt like it could be around the corner, or it could be anywhere, and you didn't know what was going to happen next. I loved his mask. His character was really creepy, and the mask really helped with that. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, and you haven't seen any of the advertising or anything, he has this 2-piece devil mask that he can take off certain pieces of, or the mouthpiece he can interchange with others depending on his emotions, and it can make a lot of the scenes in this movie really scary. And of course, with this kind of creepy character, someone who kidnaps children and someone who acts the way he does, I feel like any mask could have done a pretty good job, but I do think that this devil mask was perfect for this movie, and the changing expressions of it, or the taking of pieces off of it, really, really helped with that.
I'll scratch your face.
This face?
There were certain scenes where the main character, Finn, were trying to escape, or when he was doing things, and my main concern wasn't even what he was doing, it's where the grabber was. Was he coming down at any given point? Was he already in the room? I mean, you were freaked out constantly, at least I was. You were constantly uncomfortable and constantly worried about what was going to happen next and whether or not he was going to come back down. And I think Ethan Hawke did a fantastic job with this role.
Hang up the phone!
Like I've been saying, this movie was pretty scary to me, and a lot of the horror aspects of this movie are derived from real life. It is pretty terrifying to imagine a character driving around in a van and taking children. And unfortunately, that is a really real aspect of our life, and I think this movie did a great job capturing how uneasy that makes you feel. Even if you're not up front scared, you at least feel creeped out at any given point. I mean, there's certain scenes where the kids are just doing their own thing, and either in the background or in front of them, you'll see this van pull out, and it's just ominous. And while the supernatural aspect of this movie with the kids, their ghosts calling Finn on the black phone, I think the main scariness of this movie comes from Ethan Hawke's character and how real it could be. Now, before I get into what I didn't necessarily like about the movie, I just want to talk for a second about a tonal shift that this movie has towards the end. I think that the first 2 acts of it maintain a pretty horror-oriented tone, but towards the end, primarily, I want to say, not even just the 3rd act, more of the second half of the 3rd act, it goes less in the horror look of things and more in the thriller. The movie doesn't strive more for scares as it does just you getting amped up because Finney's like escape plan is coming to fruition, and the cops are closing in on the killer and all that, and it takes up more of a thriller vibe at that time. And it might feel a little jarring to some, but I do feel like this was pretty well orchestrated, and it feels natural, because this movie isn't just like entirely supposed to scare you. It does have a lot of thriller aspects to it. So this tonal shift towards the end felt pretty natural. Again, that's not really a good thing or a bad thing. I just wanted to point that out, that that's something that I noticed, that this movie felt different towards the end than it did during the beginning. It's unclear why the grabber takes children in this movie, and that's not necessarily a negative thing. I just also wanted to mention that it's never really said why the grabber takes kids. And that actually kind of helps with the horror aspect, because you don't really know what his intentions are. You don't really know what he plans to do with Finney. I mean, it's obvious that he's in danger because all other children that were taken by him ended up dead, murdered rather, by his hand. So while you didn't really know exactly why the grabber took children, they definitely weren't for good purposes. Again, I don't really know if that has a purpose in this review, me saying that, but it's just another thing that kind of stuck out to me that I wanted to mention. And I could probably make my own video about it if you want to really go in depth there, but I'm not going to here. Now for my negatives, I don't really have a lot of negatives about this movie, and majority of them do come from how the kids interact with each other. I do feel like the interactions between the children in this movie are pretty over the top. I mean, like, there's kids just beating each other up in like every other scene, and it's not like your normal like kid roughhousing. I mean, they are literally caving each other's faces in. There's a scene where a young girl hits this kid over the head with a rock and probably busted his skull open. I mean, and it happens a little bit too often. I mean, obviously I wasn't around during that time period, but I just feel like that was a bit of a stretch. And along that same line, a lot of the dialogue between the kid characters mostly just felt a little cheesy or just a little odd. I'm not going to say cringy, but I mean, there were a few lines there that stuck out to me. And I'm not really going to go into incredible detail about what was said, but it's just odd. A few of the interactions between kids were a little over the top. I mean, like I was saying, just like the physical and the verbal interactions with the children can be a little odd, and I feel as if it's because it's written by people that aren't really connected to that age group, so they don't really know how the kids interact with each other. Of course, I could be entirely wrong, and kids during the 70s could have talked and acted like this with each other, but I just felt like it did not feel natural, at least during some scenes. So this review probably ended up being a lot shorter than I imagined, because I didn't really have too much to say about it. It's a pretty simple, straightforward film, and I liked it a lot. I'm going to give this movie an 8 out of 10. I think that it did a lot more right than it did wrong. I really liked the aesthetic of this movie. I liked how afraid it made me feel, and how on edge of how nervous I felt throughout the entire thing. And while I can really look past the dialogue and the childlike interactions between the kids, because this is a pretty common thing for this kind of movie, it doesn't really bother me that much. It's just what I didn't like about the movie. So with that being said, this is a very solid horror movie, and I do believe you should go see it. That is all tonight. This review felt pretty short. It felt pretty simple, which is exactly how I wanted it to be. I just wanted to get this video out to you guys so you knew I was still alive, and I am working on a few other videos. 4th of July is coming up, so I am working on a Jaws video, and that one is going to be a big one, so look forward to that. I've been Sean from Tonal Productions, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your night.